Hey everyone, it's Dylan from the Black Forest Wood Company. This week we're going to show you the process of our team creating this absolutely stunning figured Claro walnut top with a maple burl base that we did a custom blackened ash stretcher through. So after you guys have watched this video, if you feel we deserved a like, please hit that like button down below. And we upload content like this all the time, so if you want to see more builds like this, please hit the subscribe button. The first challenge that we had with this build was even finding a piece of wood that was going to work for this table base. Luckily, we have some pretty good relationships with some of the arborists here locally, so we were able to reach out to one of our friends, and he had this perfect piece of maple burl to use for us. This stump actually happened to be hollow in the center, as you can kind of see right now, which made it unusable for yielding slabs, but made it perfect for our table base. So the first step that we're doing here is trying to remove as much of the excess material on it as possible so we can get it closer to its final size, because we actually need to let this thing sit and dry for a few months before we can use it. So we're just checking our cut for level right now and checking our straight. Looks like Laser Brad did pretty good there.
Yeah, let's see.
That's pretty good.
That's pretty darn flat.
Okay, now we'll flip it upside down.
And now we can flip the base over and kind of cut these weird limbs that are coming out from the top of this stump. The other thing that you might kind of notice right now is this piece on its own obviously is not going to be able to support that table. So we have had to sort of change the design to add a lengthways stretcher into the bottom of this stump.
600 pound deadlift! Okay, so once in a while we've got to make some unusual cuts with doing a project like this here. And in this case, I'm doing a cut that is by having my blade push away from me, but it also resulted in the limb coming back towards me once it released. And as you can see by my lightning fast reflexes, I elbowed the branch out of the way. You can't be safe enough. You always have to be aware of everything that's going on around you. It's impossible to anticipate everything.
Now, I'm not really sure why we went this direction, but we opted to not sandblast this piece, and we actually picked off every single piece of bark by hand with a chisel, and then we used our wire wheel to remove any of the excess debris afterwards. So this probably isn't the most efficient way to go about this. If we were to sandblast it first, we likely could have saved quite a bit of time. But we had the base here, our guys had time to work on it, and I think it took them like nearly 4 days just of solid picking to actually get all of this debris off the outside. But now, as you can see here in this clip, it's relatively clean just from picking with a chisel. So there really wasn't any need for us to take it to the sandblasting once we had taken it that far. And now we can move on to actually adding our groove that's going to support that stretcher. The first step of that is to flatten off our top surface with our Avid CNC. So we've kind of done a little trick here. We've removed our table that we usually put our slabs on, and we're actually going to drop this base right into the platform of the CNC. And what that's going to allow us to do is not have the surface of this base sticking up 30 inches above our platform where we can't cut it, but actually sitting flush with the rest of the surface so we can get it flat with our CNC machine. And once we have that surface flat, it's onto our sliding panel saw to actually cut this groove. So we kind of designed this base around the limitations of our machinery, which is something you should always take into account when you're building furniture. Our saw blade could only cut to a certain height. I think it was about 90 millimeters, whereas our original plan for this base showed 100 mil stretcher. So instead of trying to struggle and figure out a way to cut that extra 10 millimeters, which our saw won't do, we adjust the design of our base, shrink that piece down to 90 mils, then we don't have to worry, we can just use the panel saw for the entire joinery cut here. And after we have finished our cleaning and our cutting of the joinery, now comes time to actually place this stretcher into the leg of the base. So this is a solid ash stretcher that we've created, and we have some half-lap joinery going on either end to give us width stability. So then once we've got our piece actually fitting properly into the stump, then we're going ahead and staining it black. So this is probably our most popular finishing option when it comes to ash. It still accentuates sort of that coarse grain that ash is known for, but it just creates a nice uniform finish on everything. It ties in really well into some of these modern homes that a lot of our pieces go into. I know some people complain that you're kind of ruining the natural beauty of the wood, but I think it does a really nice job to complement these tops. And now it's time to begin work on this slab. So we have had a heck of a time even getting this slab to this point. We struggled with moisture on it all along. We had to send it for additional kiln drying after it showed up to our shop when it was already supposed to be kiln dried. And finally, after about 6 months, we got it to an acceptable point of moisture below 10% where we actually feel comfortable adding our epoxy into the fills. So this client opted for a smoky green resin, kind of just a mixture of green pigment with a bit of gray pigment in there as well. And we're using our deep resin for the larger fills on here and our coat resin for some of the smaller fills. So it just depends on the size of them. You know, anything under 1/4 inch we're using coat, anything over we're using deep. And then once those are cured, it's time to take the slab back over to the Avid CNC machine and just surface off that top surface so we get it nice and flat. Something else that we take as an additional precaution on some of our tables is adding C-channels. So generally our rule of thumb for whether we're going to use them or not is if the individual pieces of wood themselves are wider than 3 feet. So this table is about 4 feet wide and it's one single slab, meaning that we want to add C-channels to this piece. You'll notice on a lot of our river tables that are wider than 3 feet, we don't add C-channels, but that's because the individual pieces of wood themselves are less than 3 feet, meaning they'll be stable. Once we get the C-channels added, it's time to take our piece upstairs and get ready to apply our Black Forest furniture oil. So our furniture oil is a hard wax oil, a lot like some of the other products that you guys see on the market like Rubio or Osmo. Now, obviously I'm going to be a little bit biased when I say this, but we developed this oil because we weren't getting the results out of some of the other finishes that we were using. With our Black Forest furniture oil, especially when combined with our Black Forest ceramics, we find we get the ultimate protection for an oil finish in terms of water resistance and abrasions. One nice little detail that we like to add as well is a solid pewter brand to the underside of our tables. One thing that I just learned that's kind of interesting is pewter is the 4th most popular metal that's used for jewelry making, and it actually is considered a fine precious metal. Once the piece is finished, it's time to actually assemble it onto the base and get everything put together. So we've used steel plates that we've screwed into the top of the base, and then we've attached the base to the tabletop using threaded inserts. Well, I hope you guys really enjoyed watching the process of this build. This one was a long time in the making. It definitely took a lot longer than some of our other builds. Like the first challenge was even finding this burl piece. When the client ordered the table, we didn't have this piece, so we had to talk to one of the local arborists who had this chunk of Manitoba maple. Then we brought in this figured slab of Clara walnut, and we had to sit on it for almost a year because it wasn't really drying properly for us, so we just had to leave it until it did dry out. But in the end, it all came out really good. So again, Clara walnut top. This is kind of a sort of the top section of a maple burl tree that you can see here, and what you can't really tell from this angle is the whole inside is decayed. So it's pretty heavy, but it's not as much as you might think. And then we cut out a notch for this blackened ash trestle to go all the way through the middle, and that's just to give it some stability lengthwise. Let us know what you guys think of this design. We've got a few more burls that we could make table bases like this if people like this sort of thing. But I appreciate you guys watching all the way until the end. Start your comment with maple burl and we'll know you made it until the end, and we'll be sure to answer your comment. Thank you guys again, and we'll see you next week. Okay. Take your child.
Yeah, tomorrow.